Hi everyone, this is what happened to me when I got government housing part 43. So for this video, I just wanted to do the disclaimer at the start of the video when I normally do it at the end. As you know, I suffered from police duty failure and other public servants doing the wrong thing by me. But I'm talking about the public servants that I dealt with. I'm not talking about public servants in general. For all I know, the other public servants who work in Victoria may do a perfectly good job. And I know that if I go down to Centrelink and I try to get something done and they do it, it's because that staff member has been trained and they're competent. And I do that and I leave. And that's to be expected. And the other point is that if I was working in the public service, I would have no issue dealing with all people in a fair and neutral and impartial manner. Okay, so what I'm talking about is the public servants who dealt with me. And for these videos, we're talking about the public servants that dealt with me during this period of time regarding this issue that was me being stalked and assaulted and harassed by the respondent. But then obviously it's grown into other issues, and those other issues are the problems that I had with people who work in the justice system. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to be telling you a few things about what some more public servants did to me. But that's not because I hate public servants, that's because their behaviour towards me was outrageous and I'm alleging that it's wrong. So as always, the content of these videos hasn't been proved in court. This is my beliefs and my opinions. And this is, I prove everything that I can where I can, but this is what I'm telling you has happened. Okay, so obviously my goal is to prove everything that I'm saying to you, but it's unfortunate that the way, because of the way I was treated and because of what happened to me in court, and because people failed to support me and because people failed to behave professionally and neutrally when they were dealing with me, I don't have much in terms of, official, of there's no stamp of approval saying that what I'm saying to you is correct, but this is what I'm saying. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm going to be showing you some notes and things that people sent to me, which were quite disturbing. And what happened to me was quite disturbing. And when I tell you that, it'll sound like I'm repeating myself because I'm trying to put in a nutshell in this particular video at the start, just so you know what's happened and to give you some context. But as you know, it has been a long time since I was initially assaulted. It was a long time since my washing machine was smashed in, the cord on my dryer was cut, that person drove a vehicle into me, which may have resulted in broken legs or even my death, of myself and my daughter. And then, of course, there was throwing rocks at my window and all the rest of it. But now we're up to the 19th of the 12th, 2016. And on this day, 2 child protection workers from Docs turned up at my home. And if you watch TikTok and a few other social media apps, you hear conspiracy theorists and other people saying that one of the way that they break people is by attacking their children. I don't know if that's what happened in this case, but when you hear the allegations that were made against me, you'll see that, it was pretty strange and pretty lame, and that the way that I was treated was not justified. So it was quite a long-winded process. So they turned up at my home, and that was a very violent incident because there was 2 of them. One was a woman who stood there and seemed to observe everything that happened, passively, and didn't seem to care about what the other person was doing. And the first person, who I'll call B, actually yelled at me really violently and in a really disturbing way in order to get into my home, and then continued yelling at me while she was in my home. So it sort of similar to what the respondent's lawyer did to me. And I must say that before I did these videos, I didn't realize that there was that much of a pattern or that much of a similarity between what people were doing to me. But there is. So that's what she did. She turned up my home. I had no idea that they were coming. Bashed on my door, um, forced her way into my home by verbally intimidating me and scaring the living daylights out of me, scared my daughter. I didn't know who it was when she first came, so I told my daughter to stay in her room because I didn't want her to witness this happening to me. But of course, she could hear it, and you know, so that was terrible. Um, and so this woman, B, came, yelled her way into my home and claimed that I wasn't taking my daughter to school. And the funny thing about that is that at that stage, my daughter only had 1 day off school, I think for the full year or the previous 12 months, and I could prove it. Because the school that she was going to at that time, on the back of your yearly reports, they actually have the amount of days that they have off um, written, and it's signed by the principal. So I said that to her. Obviously, I said, yes, I do take her to school, and I can prove it. I've got this, document. And she just kept yelling at me. She wouldn't allow me to prove her wrong. And that's another thing that kept happening throughout this. People would make allegations about me, and then when I tried to defend myself and tried to put my hand up and say, well, actually, I have got evidence that proves that, I'm doing the right thing, they just wouldn't listen to it. People wanted to accuse me of things. Public servants wanted to accuse me of things. And when I tried to say that I had evidence that what they were saying was wrong, they would not accept that evidence. But I'm going to show you that evidence. And I'm very grateful that school that my daughter was at that time did have that system. At this point in time, this is many years back, um, many years ago, but now we're, past COVID and all the rest of it. My daughter has had, a few days off school, but that's a completely different circumstance. I think it's pretty amazing that given the circumstances that we were living under at that time, that she only missed 1 day of school, and I'm really grateful for that. But it doesn't change the fact that the child protection worker who was yelling at me wouldn't listen to me when I said to her, yes, I am bringing her to school, and yes, I do have evidence to prove that. So that's why I'm criticizing that person, because of the way she treated me and because she wouldn't let me provide her with evidence that would allow me to defend myself. Anyway, what happened after that incident was a whole lot of other really distressing things for me, because as you can appreciate, the respondent was still living in the unit directly above me, and I still lived with the fear of being assaulted because he had assaulted me before. I lived with the fear of him dumping buckets of water on me, because that's another thing that he was doing. I lived with the fear that he would damage my property, and I lived with the disgust that there was all that rubbish in the side of my yard. And now, on top of that, there was another burden dumped on me, and that was having to defend myself against DOCS, who are the Department of Child Services in Victoria, Australia. And this was not just emotionally taxing, but financially taxing, because it involved a lot of I ended up having to write letters and emails and photocopy things, because obviously that woman had made an allegation about me not sending my daughter to school, and I had to prove that I did. So I then had to photocopy that and send that proof out to all these people, and it was so draining. And I was already drained. I'd already suffered a breakdown. I was already iron deficient. I was already malnourished. I was already scared, and I was already exhausted from everything else that had already happened to me. And I was already trying as hard as I could to look after my daughter in the circumstances that I was in. And the circumstances that I was in was that I was suffering pretty extreme violence from someone who was living in the same block of units as me. The other thing that I wanted to mention in this video is that normally if someone assaults you, you get the opportunity to get away from them and to heal. If someone punched you at the local shopping centre, you could report it to the police and then go home. I didn't get that opportunity. The person who assaulted me lived in the unit above me and looked at me from his windows that were above me if I was in the backyard, and watched me from another window at the front of this block of units when I left and when I came back. I was under surveillance all the time by someone who assaulted me. So I never got the chance to exhale. And I admit, that there are hundreds of things that I wanted to give to my daughter, and I would never have wanted her to suffer what we went through, but it wasn't my fault. And I didn't appreciate being blamed for it. And I was sick and tired of being blamed for my circumstances and for the way I responded to my circumstances. And most importantly, basically, what I'm saying is that because this woman came to me yelling her way through my front door, and the how dramatic that was and the effect that it had on me and my daughter, who was terrified, I would have to say that she wasn't neutral and she wasn't professional. If she came to me and said, or, preferably emailed me, not turned up at my front door, and said, Sarah, I was just wondering if you take your daughter to school because we've had reports you didn't, I would just photocopy or scan the evidence that I had and send it to her and say, yes, well, actually I am, and here's the evidence. And it was signed by the principal, and that was signed by the principal many months before this woman turned up at my home. So there could be no suggestion that I had went to him and asked him to do that for me. So I'm saying that the way I was dealt with by public servants consistently over that whole period of time, and at other times, but I won't discuss that in this series, was very bad. And I'm not saying that it was bad because it wasn't professional. I'm saying that it was bad because it wasn't neutral and it wasn't respectful. She could have got into my home or spoken to me without yelling at me. She could have listened to me when I said, actually, I do have evidence. She could have asked, she sort of said, oh, well, okay, so you've got evidence. Okay, well, here's my number, or here's my email address. Send it to me. It could have been that simple, but it wasn't. It was dramatic and it was violent and it was belligerent. And that's the main issue that I have with these people, that the violence that they use against me is so extreme, and they are so sure that I'm doing the wrong thing. And when I plead with them to listen to me and to consider my evidence, they don't. The child protection worker didn't, the respondent's lawyer didn't, the police didn't. And as it turns out, when we finally get to my final court hearing, the judge who heard my application for compensation didn't listen to what I was saying and didn't believe me. And I don't believe he properly considered my evidence, because I think that if he did consider my evidence, then I would have been awarded compensation. But this is what I wanted to say before I start this video. And so from now, I'll just go forward as I normally do and explain to you what happened. And I'll put up some shots of the evidence that I have so I can show everyone what happened, and so you can see my side of the story.
So you can see that I have evidence of taking my daughter to school, and this document was the last page of my daughter's school report. And the saddest part about it is that it shows that she was in grade 3 when this was happening. It was sad for me to be wrongly accused, and it was sad for my daughter to hear her mum being yelled at by another public servant. And I believe this and other incidents like this caused problems in our relationship, and I'll get to that in another series. On the 20th of the 12th, 2016, when other people were planning trips away for Christmas, I was burdened with having to make a complaint against the child protection worker who yelled at me, falsely accused me, and refused to view my evidence that I offered to show her. Defending myself from public servants had become a full-time job for me, and I didn't know how it would end. I rang the number for Docs and I asked to speak to B's supervisor, but I was told that they weren't there. Then on the 21st of the 12th, 2016, I had to attend the Heidelberg Magistrates Court for a hearing for the charge of breaching the order that the respondent had against me. So it was just one thing after another, one responsibility after another, and another day that I had to spend working for my own freedom when I never should have been targeted by public servants in the first place. My court hearing was adjourned, so I didn't know the outcome and I would have to go back to court again. Probably while the officer who charged me was on Christmas holiday, and while the officers who failed to charge the respondent for assaulting me and dumping buckets of water on me and driving a vehicle into me were on holiday too. After court, I kept ringing to make a complaint against B, and I couldn't get through to her supervisor. So I rang the Department of Human Services complaint line and I made a complaint over the phone. I asked them for an address to send the complaint to in writing, and I scanned my daughter's attendance record and I emailed it to the department. On the 22nd of the 12th, 2016, B left a message on my phone asking me to ring her. And I couldn't believe that she was allowed to contact me after I made a complaint against her. I have a picture of the message here. I couldn't believe that she was still trying to contact me, and the fact that she had yelled at me, forced her way into my home, and refused to listen to me made me really scared that she kept trying to contact me. I hoped that her supervisor would tell her to stop, but it seemed to me that B had her mind set on painting me in a certain light, and that's how it would be. Then on the 23rd of the 12th, 2016, I left my unit with my daughter, and the respondent was waiting for us on the balcony and filming us. I got this on video because, as I've said before, I filmed my path in and out of the block so I could capture any incidents where the respondent assaulted me. Not that it did any good, because I believe I was the only person who was charged so far. Anyway, when you watch this video, you can see that my daughter and I wanted to leave the unit and get out safely, but he seemed to be there waiting for us. I never would have filmed him if he wasn't on the balcony waiting for us, and obviously if he had never assaulted me before. I'm showing this video in this series because I don't believe that he can be identified in the video. You'll notice that my daughter and I whisper and walk directly out of the block and don't do or say anything to the respondent. Also notice that we had to go past his taco boss, which was a constant reminder of how trapped we were and how hard it was to get out. When I left my home, I didn't just walk out. There was locking the door, looking for my daughter, and reminding her to stay with me because I had to protect her. On top of all of this, I'd been charged by the police for walking towards the respondent, and Child Protection were now harassing me for contact with them. I had no one to turn to, and I didn't know what to do apart from just get through every day without being assaulted. So I'll play the video of what happened when we left the unit on that day. Mummy. And this one. On the same day, I received a letter via express post from B, who was asking to come to my home again. Excuse me. If you look at the letter once again, she was making it out to be an emergency and wanted to bring someone round to assess me for having mental health issues, which I found ironic given what I had been through in the last 18 months. I thought that some idiot has seen me do something that they thought was out of the ordinary and reported me to docs, but clearly I was taking my daughter to school and B thought I wasn't, so I couldn't trust her, and I knew that she wouldn't listen to me when I tried to explain myself. So I was in a very scary situation. I ran the risk of being misdiagnosed as mentally ill because the public servants who had the power to do that were taking information from malicious people and not listening to me. As I've said before, I understand how some people would have thought that I was weird, because I was, walking around filming my path all the time. But I don't believe that that was that big a deal. And I definitely don't believe it justifies the sort of response that I got from Child Protection. Also, because I was lacking sleep, because the respondent kept banging on my ceiling, that caused me to walk around talking to myself. That's just something that I do. I'm aware that I talk to myself when I'm under stress, when I lack sleep, when I'm scared, but I don't believe that justifies calling me mentally ill. It is just something that I go through. The other thing that I should mention is if B thought that I was mentally ill, why was she yelling at me? Why was she being so hard and so belligerent with me? Surely that was discrimination and abuse. I emailed the letter to the Department of Human Services, hoping that they would stop her from contacting me. So I emailed the letter that she sent me to the Department of Human Services, hoping that they would stop her from contacting me. I was under so much stress and I felt helpless. I also received another letter from a lawyer that I had contacted about my VOCAT application, but I don't remember what was in that letter.